In the world we live in today, it's all too easy to get into a fight. But in this video, I want to give you 3 things to consider before you do that. Stick around. The last thing I want this video to be is a Captain Obvious type of video, but I really do believe these are things that people are just not thinking about as they go into a situation so willingly. My internet feed every day is full of one street fight after the next, probably because the internet knows that I'm interested in it and that I study it, and I'm constantly being fed these videos, and it gets a little tiresome to watch these, but you learn a lot from it and you learn a lot about people. It's easy to say just avoid fights altogether, and by all means we should. We should not be getting in a fight or a physical altercation with another human being unless we have no other options. There are times in life where people put you in a corner and you don't have no other choice, but there are a lot of times when we do have a choice. And it's those moments where we can't allow pride and ego to sit at the table with us. The first thing I want you to consider is the most obvious, and it is the physical implications. A lot of people tend to have an over-exaggerated view of their own abilities, and they enter into a situation with too much confidence and they get hurt. There are many physical implications to be suffered from a street fight. It can be a broken hand, broken jaw, broken teeth, something that'll put you out of work. You may injure the other person in a terrible way, in a way that you never intended. The problem in life is that it's very easy to only see the beginning of something and not see the end of it. And so oftentimes when we're in a conflict with another human being and our tempers are starting to rise, we're just thinking about the beginning of that situation. We're not looking down the road. Just go to YouTube and type street fight knockouts and you'll find all kinds of people who would have done things differently if they could have. So the physical implication is this: we stand to suffer terribly, and so does the other person. It's not just two people upping and having a scrap and going on about our business. This is not the movies. We don't cut to the next scene. We don't go home happily ever after. More often than not, it's a lot worse than what we thought it would be, especially as we get older and stronger. We have to remember something may start out toe to toe, and then it may end up where somebody's done pulled a blade when you're on the ground, and then they've put several holes in you before you even realize what happened. So this rabbit trail on the physical side of things can really spiral. So you're not just fighting the person in front of you, you're also fighting the possibility of coming out on the receiving end of this in a terrible way, vice versa. This leads to the second implication I want to talk about, and that's the psychological implications of a fight. If you lose that fight and you get your butt handed to you, especially in front of a lot of people, and you take a lot of damage, it's not only going to hurt you physically, it's going to mess with you probably your whole life psychologically. Again, there's also the psychological damage you can go through for what you've done to somebody else. A lot of people, later on down the road, they'll have regret for things that they've done. People live in the moment so much, man, and they don't think about, again, what's going to happen down the road and how they may see this. Nowadays, the moment you start arguing with somebody or you start going into a conflict, you better believe there's multiple people around with their phones out ready to film this fight so that their content can go viral. And if you get smashed in front of the whole world now. At least those who are in sports combat, whether it's MMA, boxing, wrestling, or whatever, at least they get paid if they get smashed in front of the whole world. A couple of weeks ago, Bryce Mitchell, awesome UFC fighter, man, he took an overhand right. He got knocked out in front of the whole world. He was laying on the UFC mat in a seizure, but he got paid for it. And a lot of guys out here on the streets are fighting, and the same thing is happening to them, and they're not getting a penny. Obviously, no shots at Bryce. I'm just saying that that's one example of people in the sports arena who take terrible shots in competition, but they're being compensated for it. A lot of these young dudes out here with a lot of pent-up frustration, if they can't help but fight, they really need to get plugged in somewhere, whether it's MMA, boxing, wrestling, something. Sometimes the psychological effects of getting beat up or hurting somebody bad is worse than the physical. Third and final implication I want to talk about is legal implications. A lot of people don't think about it. They think they're going to fight and go home. They think they're going to have a little toe-to-toe encounter and then they're going to move on with their life. Nope. more often than not, this thing ends up in court. Especially if somebody gets hurt really bad and they're on the receiving end and they have medical expenses and all of that. I'm not saying that every fight goes to court, because it doesn't, but a lot of them do, and it's not worth it. And the thing is, you and I can totally be in the right. It could totally be self-defense in the grand scheme of things, and the jury may not see it that way. It happens to people all the time. Not to mention the way families on both sides of the exchange are affected. I'll conclude by saying that a lot of this may seem very obvious, but I don't think it is, because so many people are still mindlessly entering into physical altercations that could have been avoided on account of pride and ego and temper. And they're not thinking about these things beforehand. And it all goes back to what guys like me are always saying. We have to be just as up on things psychologically when it comes to self-defense as we do physically. So many people just want to learn a new move, and they don't want to understand the logical foundation of avoiding things altogether and how to do that. The fast track to getting in many street fights is hanging out with the wrong people, running around with the wrong crowds. Show me your friends, I'll show you your future. You're not a coward for walking away, you're wise. You want to win a fight in life? Win a fight against the person looking back at you in the mirror every day. It's you versus you in life. You are your greatest competitor. And there are a lot better ways to spend our energy than getting into a physical altercation that we didn't need to get into. If you want to fight, there's ways to go do that in an organized environment that will test you mentally and physically. You don't have to do it out here on the street where there's too many things that can go wrong. This video may not apply to everybody, but I know it will apply to somebody, and I wanted to just say these words as an encouragement and a help to you. Take care.